here to Tenuta Castello in Morcote. This was actually the venue that we used last year for the guest speakers dinner. And we were approximately 120 people last year, and moving everybody from the Hotel Splendid to come up here with all the vans, that was quite complicated. So the fact that it was so nice, I just wanted to make sure that we can come up here again, because it's just an amazing place. It's, I think they won a few prizes also for their wine that they produce here. The winery up here on the hills, I think, is just amazing. It's an amazing scenery that we can have. And also one thing that I was so worried about the weather during these last few days. And if I had to choose to have one day with sun, of course it was today. And we have been blessed. Okay, so I really hope that you're going to enjoy it. Today we have a very interesting conversation about artificial superintelligence brain-computer interfaces. And doing this in a winery in the middle of the grapes in the nature, this is actually a very funny combination. And yeah, I'm very honored also that Trent agreed to come and speak to us today. But this goes a bit farther than just having him here today. This is all connected to the relationship that we are building with Scytale Digital, that we're building with Mark, Christoph, and everybody of their team, and of course also Bill, that has participated in sponsoring during these last few years, and of course the entire atmosphere that we were able to build over the 3 years. Because even though this is the 3rd year that we do this event, I really felt an amazing passion, networking, and everything that you can just say when people get together. And more than that even, I think that about yesterday I think we were at between 250 and 300 people, but I would guess that 80% came from abroad. And this is just, yeah, more trust than that I think is not possible, and I'm sure we will be able to continue on this for the future, because it's just really something, well, sometimes I lose a bit the words because I'm a bit, how do you say in Italian, and the right word is emozionato. I'm a bit emotional, but it's okay, that's fine. Trent is an amazing entrepreneur. I mean, he has been studying this, and he's been working in artificial intelligence, I guess, from 1990s already. And we had some very interesting conversation over these last few years, and sometimes it's difficult for me to follow him because he's so forward-looking that it's a little bit difficult to connect all the dots. But it's very interesting because many things that he has told me in the last few years is that everything is actually happening, and it's even happening faster than we even can think of. And during these last few days, we had some announcements by Meta, by Mark Zuckerberg, and then a few days ago we had an announcement by ChatGPT with their new version that just came out. I mean, it's with AI, whatever you can do now is shocking. And well, this artificial superintelligent brain-computer interface, and we look at these images that we have in front of us, I mean, it's scary, but it's happening. So, Trent, please, I give you the word, and I'll let you a little bit speak on what you want to say today. One little thing also, before we actually even introduce this, sorry, I got a little bit confused, but we have a small video that I want to show a second, just to set the stage of what we're actually talking about.
So, OpenAI just dropped a bombshell at their spring update event on Monday. They've unleashed a brand new model called GPT-4o, and trust me, this thing is going to change the game like never before. So what's the big deal about it? For starters, it's packing some serious GPT-4 level power, and here's the kicker, it's available to everyone even if you're not paying for a subscription. OpenAI's head honcho Sam Altman had been dropping hints about some cool new features coming to ChatGPT and GPT-4, and while he crushed our dreams of a GPT-5 or an OpenAI search engine, the GPT-4o announcement has the AI world going absolutely nuts. During the event, OpenAI's top tech guru, Mira Murati, took the stage to give us the lowdown on GPT-4o. She called it a huge step forward in making AI super easy to use and accessible to everyone. No more exclusive clubs or VIP access needed. GPT-4o is here for the masses. Now get this, GPT-4o can work its magic across voice, text, and even vision. Its older sibling, GPT-4, could already analyze images and text, but GPT-4o takes it to the next level by throwing speech into the mix. This means you can actually talk to the AI like you would with a real person. And impressively, there is almost no latency in this interaction.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey there, it's going great.
How about you?
The AI responds to spoken input almost instantaneously, ensuring a smooth and immediate conversation. GPT-4o's real-time chat is so advanced that it could give those sci-fi AI companions a run for their money. Remember the AI girlfriend from the movie Her? Well, GPT-4o is making that a reality. It can pick up on the tone of your voice, figure out if you're feeling happy, sad, or anything in between, and respond in a way that's genuinely helpful and supportive. But it isn't just about virtual companionship, it's also a master of language. During the event, they showed off how GPT-4o can act as a real-time translator between people who speak totally different languages.
Mark, io mi chiedo se le balene potessero parlare, cosa ci direbbero?
Mike, she wonders if whales could talk, what would they tell us?
They might ask, how do we solve linear equations?
Potrebbero chiederci come risolviamo le equazioni lineari.
So, an Italian and an English speaker having a full-blown conversation with GPT-4o instantly translating every word, which is another cool thing it can do now. GPT-4o's ability to understand and express emotions is yet another game changer.
Well, hello, Bowser. Aren't you just the most adorable little thing?
It can tell if you're feeling down or on top of the world just by the way you speak, and it can respond with the perfect words to match your mood. And get this, it can even change its own tone and vibe to keep things interesting. Heck, if you ask nicely, it might even serenade you with a song, as they've showed at the demo.
And so Byte found another robot friend, and they live circuitly ever after.
So, to show off just how incredible GPT-4o is, OpenAI put on a live conversation demo. The AI was firing off responses to the presenter's voice at lightning speed, dishing out tips on breathing techniques, and even analyzing the presenter's breath sounds to give some personalized advice. We're talking real-time interaction that puts those clunky, slowpoke AI models to shame. But it gets even better. GPT-4o isn't just smarter than its predecessor, it's also faster. OpenAI says this new model is a speed demon compared to GPT-4, which means smoother, snappier conversations. And with its boosted skills across text, video, and audio, this new model is like the iPhone of AI. OpenAI didn't stop there though. They also unveiled a shiny new desktop version of ChatGPT complete with a slick user interface that's so intuitive, you'll forget you're even talking to an AI. It's all about making the experience feel as natural as possible, so you can focus on having awesome conversations and getting stuff done. Now, GPT-4o is available to everyone, even if you're not paying a dime.
Okay, well, this just gives a hint of actually what is happening and how fast everything is changing. I'm also going to show you just, can you please go on the next slide? Okay, well, no, we have actually more, but it's okay. Now, well, I remember what I put in. There was also on the 15th of April, Meta, Mark Zuckerberg, he came out also with unveiling a new version of AI on how they implement this in their own company. But even more than that is they really, and Trent is going to show it right away now. I mean, they have these glasses where you can film everything and you can see. I'll let you explain what this all does. But let's not forget Meta is used Instagram, Messenger, WhatsApp, and whatever, well, Facebook at the same time. We're talking about 3.2 billion people who are using this application. And we are what, 8 billion in the world, and maybe 2.5 billion or 3 billion don't have access. So more than 50% of the world population are using these apps. And this, I mean, we're talking in these days about decentralization, and of course companies don't need to have too much power and so on. But the reality is that Meta has access to more than 3 billion people. So imagine how much they can influence everything connected to AI. I mean, it's just shocking.
All right, so yes, can you bring up my slides? And as an intro, I'd like to sort of loop with what Sascha was saying. These glasses, they're a classic Ray-Ban style, but inside, when I wear them, I can press a button, take a photo. I can press a button for longer, it's taking a real-time video. And I can also get it to play music on my phone just by tapping. And also I can interact with a chatbot like GPT-4. And this is all built into this model that was released last fall. And that's the current model. The video that Sascha had wanted to show was Mark Zuckerberg talking about what the V2, V3, V4 of this will be. things like where it has a visual input as well, rather than just the audio interface and the visual out, as well as neural connections, brain-computer interfaces. So this stuff is coming. This is not just the dreams of technologists like me of 10 years, 20 years from now. This stuff is coming hard and fast. And so what I'm going to be doing today is connecting the dots for you. And so I find that it's for those of you who aren't technologists, you might feel like the future is crashing into you very quickly, and it might even feel daunting, right? But at the same time, one can actually paint a picture of what the future might look like 5 years from now, 20 years from now, 50 years from now, right? And I'm an engineer. One thing that I like to repeat is it's easier to interpolate than to extrapolate. So if you feel like the future's crashing because you don't know which way it's going to go, well, if you kind of know where the future is, then all you need to do is have a chain of events starting from now, and then you just go check, 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 check until you arrive at that future 10 years from now, 20 years from now, right? So interpolation is easier than extrapolation. So if you have visions of the future of what might make sense, you work your way backwards to the now, and then you figure out what those steps are in between. So what I'm going to be doing today is teaching you about what those steps are for the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, as a sequence of events, and also why it's really important. It's really important. It's going to happen because people are going to make a lot of money. But there's a second reason, and the second reason is that artificial superintelligence is coming. And this will actually basically light a fire under everyone's butts, basically, to make it really happen. So it's between those two things that will drive what I'm about to share with you, and I'm going to walk you down the garden path towards an endpoint that you might find surprising, and maybe even hard to digest. It's a bit of a black pill to some, but I'm going to share it with you because I think it's really important to start getting the word out of what this could look like. So with that, I'm going to jump into my presentation and get going. So first of all, Sascha just showed this video of OpenAI and their advances, right? They had GPT-1, 2, 3, 4, heading towards GPT-5. Every year or so, it's another version, right? And Sam Altman himself has talked about how, we're only a couple of innovations away from hitting artificial general intelligence, which is AI that is at the level of humans across the board. It can speak like humans. It's basically sort of par with humans across the board on all the different skills. And once you have AGI, artificial general intelligence, then you have another 10x of compute increase, another 100x, which these days with AI, 10x is 1 year. So 1 year, so 3 years from AGI, we'll get artificial superintelligence, where AI is 1,000x more powerful than a level of humans, okay? So this is coming because people are going to make a lot of money from it. I'll get into the details, but that's a summary. So I'm going to be working with the premise that artificial superintelligence is coming and going from there. So let's keep going. This is just the top level intro. I will unpack it for you. So next slide. The question is, how do we react, right? These things are like 1,000x smarter than humans. How do we react? Next. But the question is, it's not necessarily how do we react. Do we want to decelerate it and stuff, which by the way isn't really feasible. But what do we want ultimately? And when I say we, I mean we as humanity. Next. Well, for starters, we want to not die, right? And not die from the AIs becoming our overlords, and also not die from asteroid strikes and so on. So that's a starting point, right? But that's an away framing. What about a towards framing, a positive framing? Next. What about exploring the cosmos, Star Trek style? That's pretty good, right? We get on these ships and go around the cosmos and populate new planets and maybe meet life, maybe not. Maybe the universe actually is empty, who knows? But that could be a grand adventure for humanity, and that's something to aim for and towards. First step, Mars, and then beyond. But not just exploring the cosmos, you can have humanity expand and get much bigger, stronger. We're talking using 10x, 1,000x, 1,000,000x more energy, harnessing the energy of the sun directly by capturing in these Dyson spheres, and so on. And this might seem outrageous right now, but this is what we have in technology now would have sounded outrageous to Leonardo da Vinci or other people in the 15th century or even in the 18th or 19th centuries. So we are already living in a future that is unbelievable to most people 100 years ago. Keep going. So overall, towards goal is let's point humanity towards exploring the cosmos, reshaping the cosmos, having a grand adventure, right? And this is not just a 10-year thing. This is a 50-year thing, a 500-year thing, a 5,000-year thing. So in my talk today, I'm going to unpack this in two parts. I'm going to talk about AI, leading to AI superintelligence, and I'm going to have a side track on AI risk, because it's a key factor. And then I'm going to talk about, in the face of AI superintelligence and market, what about humans? And so how do humans actually compete with these AI superintelligences? And that leads us to human superintelligence. Next slide, please. Okay, let's talk about AI and AI superintelligence. Next. So this is a picture on the right. This is a radio transmitter and receiver. So in the 2000s, I come from the world of analog design, wireless design, all of this. And it's super, super hard to design a radio antenna that actually meets specs, that has enough capture of the frequencies from beyond, doesn't distort the signal, has low power consumption and all of this, right, all at once. It's really, really hard. So people started exploring techniques using evolution to explore whole new ideas and whole new shapes. And this thing here, it looks like a bent paperclip, but it's actually an evolved design. So friends of mine at NASA took this and put these paperclip-shaped things into a computer. They simulated each candidate paperclip design. The ones that did the best, they allowed them to make tweaks, basically have children, make babies, and then they had generations and generations and generations of these things, 500, 5,000 generations simulated in a computer. And then after a day of running that, then they would take the final design and take it to the lab down the street in NASA Ames in California, and then build these. And it turns out that these designs, these bent paperclips, are the best ever radios for their applications. So one of those friends, Jason Lone, he actually then created a company called X5 Systems and has been deploying these for space. So they supply Jet Propulsion Lab and so on with their antennas. And this is basically all doing a task that only a human could previously do, right? So this is a narrow AI example. It's not trying to be, at the level of humans for everything. In this case, it's just at the level of wireless antenna designers. Okay, next slide. This is the world that I come from. This is the world of semiconductor chips. Inside your phone, you've got about 20 chips, right? Those are the black things. And that's just the packaging. If you peel away the packaging, and this is what you see, stuff like this. Each one of these chips has about 20 billion transistors. A transistor basically is the smallest building block. And they're wildly complicated, right? But did you know that one of these chips, from beginning to end, they're designed in about 3 months by a team of 10 to 50 people, depending on the chip. 20 billion moving parts designed by a team of 10 to 50 people in 3 months. How is that possible? The answer? AI. That's the only way. And in fact, industry of CAD, computer-aided design, for chip design, has always been at the forefront of designing this stuff. For example, in 1984, this guy named Kirkpatrick developed an algorithm called simulated annealing, which is a staple of the AI world. In fact, the modern training algorithms for LLMs are derivatives of that simulated annealing algorithm from the 80s. And myself, too, this is what I worked on for designing and verifying chips. For one example is NVIDIA. They became our customer for my second startup. And every single chip manufactured by NVIDIA from about 2009 onwards is verified with software from us that has AI under the hood to verify it. TSMC was using our software for designing the next generation of Moore's Law. So it's literally AI to drive Moore's Law. And this has been happening since about 2010. So narrow AI has been spreading quietly throughout the world without anyone really paying attention. But now it's hit the mainstream because we have things like DALL-E and ChatGPT that are really teaching the world. But for those of us in the AI land, we're like, well, this is good, right? Because now things that we've been talking about with creative AI and powerful AIs and all this for 20, 30 years, the rest of the world is waking up to and realizing, oh, this is really interesting. And maybe there's some risk that we should talk about. Next slide. So AI, the x-axis here is time from 1950 to now. And the y-axis is training compute, or flops, for the biggest model, okay? And models, typically these days, are neural networks, but there's other things. And even neural networks, they've been around since the 1950s, since the very earliest days of AI. And bit by bit, the amount of compute thrown in to train a given model is going up exponentially. So this y-axis is logarithmic, right? So 10x, 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 all the way here, right? And in about, right here, in about the year 2012 or so, was when we crossed this threshold. So inside our brains, we've got 100 billion neurons, and there's different ways to measure, but you can compare that to the number of flops, floating point operations of a computer, okay? We run at about 20 petaflops, okay? So this is 10 to the 12 flops. So a lot, right? A million billions, okay? So we run at 20 million billion flops as humans, okay? And you know how 1 horsepower is 768 watts of power? But everyone understands what a horse is, right? So if you have a car, at first, a car would be 5 horsepower and be like, yes, it's more powerful than 5 horses. Well, right now, as of 2012 or so, we had AI models that were trained with a level of 1 person worth of compute, okay? That was 12 years ago. Since that time, the knee has shifted on this exponential, and we've gone another 8 orders of magnitude or so, which is another 100 million x worth of compute. So these modern AI models coming out of OpenAI and stuff are radically more compute than humans. Now, of course, they don't use the compute as efficiently, right? But 10 orders of magnitude is enough to start getting you really close to human-level capabilities. And this is why OpenAI is getting there, right? It turns out that really all you needed was just more compute and more data. We didn't need massive innovations. The neural networks from 1950, that was established as models, very simple models of the brain. And then in 1989, there was the backpropagation algorithm. And those were the 2 big advances. Since that, most of the advances has been more data, more compute. And this is actually a bit embarrassing to the AI world, because as an AI researcher, you want to invent new algorithms and all that, right? But people have discovered that just more compute and more data leads to more powerful models, right? And of course, you can have a trick here and there to buy you 10x, but usually it gets run over by data and compute. But this also means that we don't necessarily need massively more innovations to make this happen. Moore's law will take us there. Okay, keep going. So market forces are driving AI compute up. And it's going to take us to general intelligence, when an AI that can do all tasks that a human can only previously do, right? And GPT-4o is now the state of the art of that. And you see that it's getting very close, right? Bit by bit, it's getting there. This is AGI, artificial general intelligence, as opposed to AI, or narrow AI, which is just the narrow tasks. Okay, next slide. But once we get to artificial general intelligence, another 10x, another 1,000x of compute, then it's blowing past AGI, and that takes us to artificial superintelligence, ASI, right? And so it can do all tasks at a level far exceeding a human. And so AGI, the timing for that, a lot of the AI people, and I agree with this timeline, it's 3 to 10 years away, and more likely close to 3, right? Like OpenAI has talked about, it's only a couple innovations away. And we have Moore's law pushing this all, making this easier, easier, easier all the time, all the time. And ASI is just another 10x to 1,000x worth of compute beyond. Okay, next. So this is, when you're trying to think about superintelligence, this is maybe the first idea. You've got, this is like IQ scales, right? So the average human has IQ around 100, okay? A monkey, a chimp, whatever, has IQ around 55, 60, okay? And then like the smartest, the Einsteins of the world, the 0.1%, are like 145, 150, right? And everyone is thinking that superintelligence, your brain wants to think of superintelligence is like an Einstein, right? No. Next slide. This is what AI superintelligence is. Way beyond. You stretch the scale, and it's radically smarter, right? So you have to, if there's one side in this first part of the intro that I want you to remember, it's this one. AI superintelligence is going to be far beyond your comprehension of what intelligence is. It'll be so smart that we might consider it gods, right? Just like when we look down at the ants, and if they had, an ability, well, they look up, and to them, we're gods, right? They can't even conceive of what we're like, right? Of our intelligence. So something that's 1,000x more than us, it will be very hard for us to conceive of it like that. And there are science fiction novels that explore this, that AIs are so much smarter than humans that the humans treat them as gods. Hyperion is one great example. Next slide. Okay, so we've got these AIs that are radically smarter than us. Next slide. Right? Here's the risk. When we look at the ants, and imagine they come along to us and they say, hey, dear humans, can you lower your level down to the level of ant intelligence, please? Can you align your values with human values? We were like, screw off, no way, right? Why would we do that, right? Well, when you have these AI superintelligences that are 1,000x smarter than us, do you think they'll really care what we think when we're asking for them to dumb down to our level as humans? They'll be so much beyond. They might be indifferent, they might be friendly with us, but they might not, right? We can't guarantee that they're going to be nice to humanity. So this is the risk, that there's going to be a big boot on us, right? We're going to be under that boot. That's the risk, and it's a very real risk. And AI people who aren't in publicly traded companies can say this. AI people who are can't. Next slide. So this is the risk. What can we do about it, right? So one idea is let go. This is evolution. This is the next phase of humanity. AIs themselves are the next phase, right? So this is one idea. And this is what people like Larry Page of Google have talked about, okay? So does that work? Well, next slide. The problem is, I'm a human. I want to have a role in this future, right? I want to be part of this grand adventure to explore the cosmos, to reshape the cosmos. And maybe you do too, right? So overall, humanity wants a role in the future, and it's a pretty reasonable thing to hope for. Next slide. So that's the problem there. It's not really solving it. Okay, there's lots of people saying, put it in a cage, unplug it if there's problems, right? Well, there's a big problem with this. I come from the world of decentralization, right? Ocean protocol, data, all that. And we're in the process, us and many others in the world of AI mixed with blockchain together. And what's getting built already with things like Ethereum, you can put a smart contract on Ethereum, a piece of computer code, a script running on Ethereum, and you can't turn it off, ever. It's just there. It's a sort of a super stupid robot that you can't turn off. But what if it wasn't a super stupid robot? What if it was a lot smarter? So next slide. So the problem with this is, if you put it in a cage and unplug it problems, well, unplugging doesn't help. Can you unplug Bitcoin? No, because there's thousands, tens of thousands of nodes that are running. There's always going to be 10, 50, 500 people running these nodes. Same thing with these decentralized AIs, right? So you just can't unplug. It's not going to happen, right? Next slide. Well, what about a fancier cage, right? So here, this is from a scene from Avengers 1. This is Loki, Thor's brother, the kind of crazy, half good, half bad brother. And he was misbehaving, right? So Thor and the other guys put him in this fancy cage, right? You know what happened? Next slide. Loki tricked Thor, and Thor accidentally opened the door, and then Loki walked out. And he said, Thor, are you ever not going to fall for that? So basically, Loki used social engineering to escape the cage. And we might think, yeah, but that's just movies, that's just Avengers. Well, you know, the world's greatest hacker, Kevin Mitnick, he wrote this awesome autobiography of basically being able to hack into all these computer systems. And his core trick was social engineering. He would call up, you know, the Department of Motor Vehicles in USA and saying, hey, you know, I was just in a car accident. My wife needs surgery immediately, but I need access to the license to tell the ambulance driver, what's the number, blah, blah, blah. And then they would give him access, right? And then he was in. And he just did this again and again and again. So humans are fallible. You know, we get phishing emails all the time, and we have to analyze, was this really from the person that it's supposed to be from? So overall then, it doesn't matter how fancy the cage is, humans are the weak factor here, right? Next slide. Okay, what about slow it down and solve this, right? And there's people like Eliezer Yudkowsky talking about this. Like, we gotta slow it down and so on. Does that work, right? Next slide. The problem is there's no actual breaks. Why? Think of all the money that OpenAI is making right now and that Microsoft is making, right? Microsoft's market cap went up like 50% or 100% in the last year on the basis of OpenAI killing it, right? And think of all the compute that Azure is driving, right? And of course, it's not just OpenAI and Microsoft. It's also Meta, where they're going, and all these other competitors. And then there's still these cluster of 5 or 10 companies in USA, plus another 5 or 10 companies quietly doing it in China. So ultimately, it's this arms race between USA and China. Why? Money and power. You think that's going to turn off? Another analogy is nuclear, right? So you can have all the nuclear disarmament talks you want, but at the end of the day, people won't give it up because they don't want to have the risk of losing, right? And in this case, it's a much more gradual thing. It's not just bomb or no. It's, you know, making money steadily all the way along, right? So there's too much money to be made and too much power to be risk giving up that it's just not going to slow down, right? And in fact, it's accelerating. Another good example on this, actually, I'll go to the next slide because it talks about it more. So the next one, oh no, it's the one after. So there is a movement out there called effective accelerationism, EAC for short, right? And their idea is, you know what? Just let everyone have it at it, speed it up, right? And this is actually probably safer than letting governments have oversight, because if governments have oversight, it's all centralized in one oversight committee, right? And it's reliant on their expertise. But if you let everyone to kind of build their own models quietly otherwise, then everyone can access, rather than just this one centralized government entity, as well as the criminals, right? So it's actually much safer to let everyone have at it, because you have 1,000, 10,000, a billion AI models. But it actually doesn't mitigate AI overtaking, right? So it's not an actual solution, but it's more acceptable than most of the other ones, and it actually acknowledges that AI is accelerating anyway. Keep going. Here's an interesting idea that came from OpenAI. Get an AGI to solve it. So they said, okay, we're going to start with an AI that is aligned, like say GPT-4, and then use that to try to align GPT-5, and then use GPT-5 to try to align GPT-6, right? But then you've got these chains. Sort of, I think it's like leverage and trading, right? 5x leverage, 10x leverage, 1,000x leverage. The thing is, if you have an ASI that's 1,000x smarter than a human, then that's such crazy leverage that it's going to break, right? And so OpenAI has been trying to make alignment work, but also among the announcements of this week, Jan Leike, who is head of AI alignment in OpenAI, he had a tweet with exactly 2 words: I resigned. So OpenAI themselves has given up on alignment. Now, they'll probably try to hire some other people too, to be politically correct and all that, but ultimately, it's a losing battle because of all the things I talked about here. So what do we do? Next slide. Okay, yeah, this is even, keep going, next slide. Well, one of them is align the AI with a sort of post hoc wrapper. It's sort of like putting a muffler in a car so it's not so loud, right? And this is what GPT-4 did, another OpenAI thing, and it actually worked okay, right? Next slide. The challenge is endless jailbreaks, right? So even when GPT-4 came out, people would show how they could get around the wrapper and get the AI to, say evil things and all this, right? So it doesn't actually work. It's like whack-a-mole, right? And I've been there too. I've actually trained AIs to try to do, creative design of analog circuits, and it comes up with the crazy designs. You try to add more constraints to constrain it, and it keeps finding its way around. So AIs are wildly creative, right? This idea that humans can be the only creative thing, that's a myth. And now the whole world has seen that. I've been exploring this for 20 years. So anyway, though, you have endless jailbreaks of people working around these constraints. Next slide. There's an idea, rather than putting the muffler on afterwards, rather than aligning post hoc, you can also try to align the AI while growing it. It's like a square watermelon, right? In Japan, they have these where they have them in boxes, and then they grow the watermelon, and it ends up square, right? So that's an interesting idea, and maybe it's worth exploring. I worry that it'll still end up 1,000x smarter, so how aligned will it be? But next slide. That is the challenge, and you start with 1x, and then hopefully keep it aligned and happy with you, right? So this is something that Albert Wenger, the VC of, one of the founders of Union Square Ventures, is driving, and him and I have long conversations about this. Next slide. So there's one, though, that is probably a little less politically acceptable right now, but it might be the only way, and that is get a competitive substrate. So in a sense, the competitive substrate is silicon, right? Moore's law, which makes silicon more powerful every, 2x more powerful every year or so, depending. So we as humans need our meat-bag brains to somehow find a way to get competitive with silicon. And how do you do that, right? How do you, reconcile your meat-bag brains with the silicon that can get 100x, 1,000x, and more powerful than us? That's the question. Next. So this has promise, right? It's not quite as politically acceptable as the rest, but it might be the only way. Next slide. Okay. So I've laid out the problem from the perspective of AI risk, as well as I've also hinted at the market forces, right? So now I'm going to talk about going from humans to human superintelligence. And this will be unlocking us for exploring the cosmos and reshaping the cosmos. So let's get at it. Next slide, please. Okay, so already, actually, you might have known about the famous physicist Stephen Hawking, right? He was the guy with ALS, Lou Gehrig's syndrome, and he was in the wheelchair. And he was like that ever since he was in his early 20s, he got it. But since that time, he wrote many amazing books about physics, many of them for the mainstream. Yet he couldn't move because Lou Gehrig's disease made him paralyzed from actually all of his body, even his mouth could barely move. So how the heck did he write these books? And the answer is EEG. So he would have these sensors on his, for the skin of his scalp, all around his head, and it would measure the electrical activity, and then it could use the measure of electrical activity to convert that to controlling a keyboard, right? So instead of using a mouse or controlling a keyboard with your fingers, it's actually it's sensing the signals on your forehead, and he got good at it over time, enough to write several books. So this idea, in his case, EEGs, electroencephalography, has been around since the 1970s. And at first it wasn't very good. In his case, it was good enough to write several books, from the 80s, 90s, and so on. And now it keeps advancing, right? So as of 2012, out of China, they had research where it was about 20 words per minute. And the state of the art these days, they've tacked on LLMs, it's about 55 words per minute. So that's probably faster typing than most of us in the room, definitely me. I probably type 30, 40 words per minute, I don't know. So 55 words per minute typing, just by thinking about it from an EEG, a non-invasive thing that's just sensing your scalp, that is the state of the art today. So you can actually have fast typing in this fashion. So this is, I'm going to show you other technologies that we have right now that it's useful to be aware of. So this is one. Next slide. Another one is, so far the typing isn't at the consumer level, right? But there's, there's this idea of getting into flow states and trying to focus, right? So imagine if you have headphones, and they're noise canceling, all of that, but they also are detecting some of the EEG signals on your scalp, on your ears, okay? And it can, from that, detect, are you concentrating or not? It's actually quite easy to detect because your brain gives off certain alpha patterns, all this. So there's a startup called Neurable that's actually focusing on this, and basically as you're listening to music, as you're listening to the music. It tells you if you lose focus, if you get distracted, it'll say, ping, ping, hey, get back at it. And you're like, oh, yeah, yeah. And then you go back at it. So it's a small intervention, but it's super useful. And this has obviously other uses too, but that's a great consumer level app that's actually useful. Next slide. Okay. People can put subtitles on glasses very easily, like this. So there's actually several companies that do this. Probably Luxottica out of Milan is one of them too. And it's actually usually often to help deaf people, right? So subtitles on here, and this is actually LED technology in many cases that has been around since the 70s, right? Very off the shelf to have. You can probably put this thing on here for $10 worth of materials, right? So quite cheap. And this is actually being rolled out by several companies already. Subtitles on glasses, right? So even, we had the demo before from OpenAI where they were doing the real-time translation. Well, it had to be one person speaking, the other person waiting for the translation back and forth. Well, what if when that woman was speaking Italian, I was seeing the subtitles for English on my glasses, right? So it can be even faster. And this is immediately possible with today's technology. Next slide. Now there's cameras with microphones on them, and that's the Ray-Ban Meta smart glasses, right? That's these things, right? And this also was, this is a classic Ray-Ban style, also Luxottica then. And this is the V1, right? So, remember the iPhone one? It didn't do a lot, but it was good enough for people to want to buy and get interested in. It didn't have copy and paste. It didn't have the App Store. But then key things came in, copy and paste, the App Store, and many amazing apps, right? So we are just at the V1 of the Meta Ray-Ban smart glasses. And it's going to go beyond Ray-Ban. It's going to go beyond Luxottica as well, and going beyond Meta. But this is a great starting point. It's got the cameras for photos and video. It's got the chat. It's got the music. It's got the earphones, all of this, right? And Mark Zuckerberg, he's talking about a V2 or V3 that has the visual display, right? So they could start with subtitles and glasses, but they could also go to the full visual display. They could have eye scanning, like I'll get to the next slide, with the Apple Vision Pro. And then Zuckerberg also has been talking about EEGs. In fact, 2 years ago, they spent $500 million to buy a brain-computer interface startup called Control Labs. Why? Because that's their V3 or V4, and they want it, right? There's money in this. Next slide. Another thing in this, right, the virtual worlds. So Meta Quest 3 came out last fall, and it's the first really, truly good mixed reality headset, right? So they're focusing on video games. They actually have extremely good adoption on this. And in this case, it's trying to visualize people playing video games in their living room. There's even an app for building Lego. So it's pretty cool, and they have a lot of great apps, actually. This was the very first VR device that I've used that actually fooled my brain, right? And it was also cool because you can make it mixed reality. And of course, the Apple Vision Pro came out a couple months ago. And this, of course, is a heavier goggles, right? And it's expensive. It's $3,000, $4,000. Coming to Europe in June, so soon. Didn't come to us yet. I felt left out. But a key thing here is that it actually has eye tracking built in. So Apple bought several eye tracking startups over the last few years, has 20+ patents around this, and it actually tracks your eyes. And your eyes themselves, you can do a lot with your eyes to control things, right? So, and they actually are leveraging this in the Apple Vision Pro. If you look at a certain region out there in space and you focus on it, then you can use it to type and to select items, right? So this is a very, very good interface, eye tracking. And in fact, next slide, once you have eye tracking with cameras, you can actually, it's considered brain-computer interface research as well, a brain-computer interface. Why? Well, for starters, if you look at it at the iris, there is a lot of information there. So people are using this as health markers, right? So just watch, in the next 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, there's going to be 5 or 25 health startups for Apple Vision Pro. And they're going to be basically analyzing your eyes and telling you what's wrong and so on. Sort of like what the Apple Watch does for certain health markers. Well, now they have a bunch more health markers. And that's just, more long-term BCI-ish, long-term in terms of timescale of research. But they're also going to be leveraging it as BCI. So this is all stuff that has been happening so far. But where is this taking us? So there's this idea of SMing, silent messaging. And basically, it's the idea of sending text or voice by thinking about it, right? And this doesn't exist now. But I take these. Imagine I've got the V3 of of Meta, Ray-Ban Meta smart glasses, or the V4, whatever it is, and I just think, and it's sensing my AEG signals here, and I can send text messages. So, Sascha, I just sent you a text message, right? That's what it's like, right? And so there's even a science fiction novel from 2006 where this is just part of the substrate. Everyone in society just SMs each other, right? Instead of DMing each other, just simply messaging, it's silent messaging, right? And it's just part of society, right? And this is a standard thing, and it's basically hands-free, it's quiet, and all of that, right? There's a BCI startup that I invested in that actually does sub-vocalization. So you put a small device here that's sort of cool looking, and with it, you whisper into it, like sort of like this. Just moving your mouth very, very slowly, and it can pick up the signals as if you're talking, and then it responds to you with an earbud, right? So it's like chatting with an AI, but silently, right? So this is technology that exists today. Another one, right? So Jiminy Cricket is, you guys know Pinocchio, right? So Jiminy Cricket is sort of like his little advisor sitting on his shoulder, always giving advice, right? So imagine you've got this silent messaging, this interface to type. Well, you can type and send messages to others, but you can also type to the chatbots, getting advice there. So you've got your little Jiminy Cricket advisor next to you all the time, right? Next slide. And also search, of course, right? Google search, all of that. So learning about things as you go. Perfect memory. This is a good one, right? So imagine I'm wearing these around all day, or maybe not sunglasses, just regular glasses, and that's coming, of course. Then I can be recording everything via glass camera and store it. And then I can retrieve as well, just by typing text, asking for retrieval, or browsing as if it's Google Photos, etc., and other ways. So what's also coming, there's several technologies for brain-computer interfaces. So beyond EEG, another one is called near-infrared scanning. So it has infrared, which is light, but not invisible. But it can actually peek through your skull and see what's going on in your brain for the first inch or two, okay? And in the back of your skull, you've got your visual cortex, and it's sort of like a grid, like a television screen. And so the near-infrared can sense what's going on there. And so if I'm imagining a pink elephant, then a pink elephant will show up in my visual cortex. And this can be detected with near-infrared. And with quite good fidelity, there was an experiment in Carnegie Mellon in 2012 where they had 100 movie clips, and people could think of the movie clip, and it would try to tell you which movie clip it was. And it was about 70, 80% accurate, so very good. And it's only gotten better since then. So basically, this visual cortex is going to serve as a two-dimensional input device. So I can think of maybe sitting at the table for breakfast, but I don't remember what I had. It uses that as a query, a search term, just sort of like Google reverse image search, uses that as a search term, and then pulls up a picture to my glasses and shows to me what I had for breakfast, right? So this is actually remembering what I did in the past. So that's perfect memory is a killer app on its own. Each of these things here are killer apps, as you might imagine. This is how the market will develop. So there's not just money in AI. There's huge money in AI. There's huge money in these consumer-level applications. And all of this, by the way, you know, the smartphone market is by far the biggest chip market, right? It's been like that for 15 years, right? Before that, we had different things from defense to laptops and so on. But these days, it's smartphones. This is the next smartphone. And in fact, right now, it's tethered to a smartphone. But electronics is going to get small enough that all you're going to have is this, right? So multi-trillion-dollar market. And that's why Facebook pivoted into Meta so aggressively, because Zuckerberg saw it, right? And it's not just Zuckerberg. Apple is going hot and heavy, and many others as well. Next slide. Okay. So share visual memories, right? So I talked about retrieving those memories in the various ways, the visual cortex or typing otherwise. And then you can send them to a friend's phone, right? So it's very nice. Instagramming immediately, all of that. Next slide. But then also, imagine I can start sharing pictures to my friends, right? So I pull up an image of what I had for breakfast, and I share that with my wife, or something that I saw in the store, and I share it with my wife, right? Or others. So this idea that a picture is worth 1,000 words, so we can communicate at a much faster in images than we can with serial bits, right? Right now I'm talking to you serially, one sort of stream, but imagine if it's this 2D video over time, right? So it allows humans to connect to each other at a much higher bandwidth, right? So in science fiction they call that a mind meld, but it's literally conversation in pictures. And to take this extreme, you can even make it where, imagine if my wife is seeing my raw images and I see hers, like the 2D visual cortex. I will learn to understand her neural signals over time, so we can even talk more closely, and close friends, all of that, right? So this is coming, and there's huge money to be made from this too, and that's especially why it's coming much sooner than you might think. Next slide. So, so this is where we're headed, and there's so much money here. So how is this going to happen? What's the evolution of this? Next slide. Okay. So with these glasses, right, start off with the EEGs, just sensing the sculpt here, and then we're going to the near-infrared, the visual cortex. But of course, the visual cortex can only go so far, right? So people are going to want to send more images, they're going to want to send it faster, they're going to want to interface faster, all this, right? Just like they want, you know, faster computers all the time, faster bandwidth. So they're going to want more and more storage, more and more compute, and, but it's held back by the bandwidth. How quickly can my brain talk to the device, right? That's going to be the bottleneck. Next slide. So this is where implants come in, right? Neuralink being the leading example. So it's basically you literally crack open your skull. Neuralink has it where they're designing robots that do this quickly in a surgery lasting 15 minutes. They cut a small hole, they crack it open, they put in the chip, and the chip stays there for a couple of years. Right now, they can't get it past a couple of years. I think that's the maximum, probably even, that's optimistic. But that's how it is right now for these chips. So this will give you massively more bandwidth. And you might have seen recent Neuralink videos. They've got a guy, from a month ago, he was playing a video game pretty well. And they had a video from last week where he was moving around the mouse about 5x faster than someone's hand. So he's already got this, an interface that's faster than you can do with a mouse. And that's technology of today. This is not tomorrow, this is technology of today. It just hasn't hit the mainstream yet, right? Like William Gibson said, the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed, right? So Neuralink has this stuff. Now they, of course, are focusing for fixing unhealthy people first. That's how the FDA works, et cetera. But not the FDA, sorry, the US medical regulatory and others. But it's coming, right? So implants, people are going to start wanting this because this will take them to the next level. And by the way, they will make you smarter, right? So there's going to be all this stuff happening where people will go to Honduras to get the chip and so on too. Like Brian Johnson recently went to Honduras to get injections to help the joints in his knees and elsewhere, right? So this is going to happen, this sort of medical tourism to places that have more lax regulatory laws. And there's going to be gray markets for this and so on. So the chips. But also, is there something like chips, but it isn't quite as crazy cracking open your skull, right? My wife doesn't like the idea of cracking open my skull. So can I do something like that? So next slide. So there's something called optogenetics, and how it works is the following. I get a needle in my arm, and it it's taken a virus-style design, put a payload on it, and that payload goes up through my bloodstream into the brain-blood barrier. And there, it injects the payload, and it updates my brain such that when my neurons fire, they're also firing photons. So light is being shot. And then it has these near-infrared detection or laser-type detection, where you wear a lightweight helmet or something lighter yet. And it detects when you're firing this, and it can detect your whole brain, right? Everything, not just a chip in the back doing a little bit. It can be detecting all of this. So this is called optogenetics, and you might think this sounds like science fiction. When I first learned about it, it felt like that too. But it was invented in 2004 out of MIT. And since that time, it's been, there's now about 100 research labs in the world researching this. Every single research lab on the planet worth their salt doing neuroscience and all medical design is researching this intensively, right? So this is coming, and it's only semi-invasive, right? Because it's just the needle. And by the way, you can get another needle and reverse it, which is pretty cool, right? Now, it's just hitting human trials in the last couple of years. There are risks too. With all of these, there's risks, but that's why there's trials, et cetera, first. So you can read and write, by the way. You can actually use lasers to update your brain too, which is interesting and scary, but of course, you start with the read and then you see how you do. Next slide. So the point is we have technologies like these and more that will give us bandwidth that are 10x, 100x, 1000x more bandwidth than the non-invasive, right? The demand will come, and I've hinted at this already. There's two reasons. One, to fix AI risk, right? If you've got these superintelligences that are 1000x smarter than us, then what do you do, right? And this is the pragmatic path, right? All the other proposals don't really make sense. And it's either Western governments will allow it because of the risk, they want to fix AI risk, or hungry smaller nations will do it first, right? So Honduras already allows it, right, out of the box. But you'll have the Ecuadors, the Argentinas of the world, African nations, whatever, just allowing this for medical tourism and so on, right? And this is actually some intersection with Web3 and nation network state and so on. The other one, though, is market forces, right? This is the next $2 trillion cell phone industry, smartphone industry, right? This will eat smartphones. Elon Musk has been asked, why aren't you doing a smartphone? And he said, I am, Neuralink. Interesting, right? So, so market forces, we're seeing how the exponential is driving up training compute, right? But there's so much money to be made here that this is going to take us there anyway. So keep going. So people are going to want the bandwidth, they're going to want the non-invasive. Next slide. Okay. And this demand will unlock semi-invasive or invasive for the mainstream, right? And performance will grow with each new device generation. So with cell phones and smartphones, we're going from, these things from the mid and late 80s all the way to the iPhones of now, right? And it's an evolution. It will happen here too. And in fact, it will be part of the same genealogy. So it's going to take a radical reshape that it's going to look like the Ray-Ban Meta smart glasses and then beyond, right? And by the way, too, beyond the glasses, you can have contact lenses that sense what you're doing too, right? And that's actually research in over 10 plus years too. So 100x plus bandwidth from the invasive or semi-invasive. and storage and compute as well, right? So there's going to be big benefits. A good way of summarizing this is you become radically smarter, right? So maybe that's the simple killer app result, right? You want to be 100x smarter, right? Because you're being augmented in this way. It's going to be an unfair advantage as a business professional. It's going to be an unfair advantage as an athlete. All of these things, right? Next slide. So, and here's the thing. It is going to feel completely natural. When you sit down to use a keyboard and you start typing, it becomes part of you. Your brain decides that, yep, this keyboard is part of me, just like my fingers. When you're riding a bike, your brain decides, yep, this bike is part of me. So we are natural-born cyborgs. We very, very quickly assimilate technology into our idea of a body intrinsically when we use these devices and objects, artifacts, right? So when you use BCI, it becomes part of you. It's not going to be something on the side. It is going to be part of you. Next slide. So this is what it's going to look like, right? At first, we're going to have, I've got my meat bag bio brain here, and I'm going to have these, the V3 of these glasses with the EEG, right? And it's going to be maybe 5 or 10% of my compute power augmenting me, helping me, right? With some of these early killer apps, right? Silent messaging and so on, right? But then it's bottlenecked by bandwidth, of course, right? Next slide. Okay. But then, EEGs will evolve, and the near infrared will get used. And it's going to get higher bandwidth. So then you can unlock more compute power because you can talk back and forth to the thing. And bit by bit, there will actually be emergent intelligence in the silicon coprocessor, and that will feel like a part of you. Remember, we are natural-born cyborgs. So now we've got the thing at like maybe half the compute power of your meat bag brain, right? So 0.5 humans plus 1 human worth of compute power. Okay. And market forces are driving this. Next slide. And then it's going to be roughly par. So we've got total 2 humans worth of compute power, and all of it is you, right? The meat bag bio side and the silicon side. And market forces keep driving this. Next slide. And then it's going to be 2x more, right? Because once again, market forces, and you want it. You want to be smarter, all of this. Next slide. And then it's going to be way more. It's going to be 100x, 1,000x more powerful than your bio side. But guess what? It is still you. Because all the way along, you've been using this, and this thing is a part of you, right? We are natural-born cyborgs. Next slide. And so, yes, it's all still you. We are natural-born cyborgs. And now, though, you have 1,000x compute power compared to what you had before. Now, you are competitive with AI superintelligences, right? Artificial superintelligence. So you're still human. You're still you, right? It's the ship of Theseus that there's changes happening, but it's still you. Right? Yet you now have a competitive substrate where you have a fighting chance to deal with this world of the pure AIs. So it's humanity dealing with the pure AIs back and forth on an equal level, right? And so this is the key thing, and market forces will take us there. Next slide. And the market and AI risk and the performance will push us, yes, to human superintelligence. So you're going to hear a lot over the next few years, more and more, about not just AGI, artificial general intelligence, but artificial superintelligence. And one of my main goals is to help catalyze all this, but teach everyone about this idea that side by side with ASI, artificial superintelligence, is HSI, human superintelligence. And this is the thing we have to accelerate, right? So overall, I call that BCI AC, brain-computer interface accelerationism, right? And it's a subset of the EAC, effective accelerationism. But it's the thing that matters the most, right? So I invite all of you to think about this because A, there's a lot of money to be made, but B, we give humanity a fighting chance towards the ASIs, towards exploring the cosmos and reshaping the cosmos. Now there's one final step of this as we have these brains go from 0.5x to 1x to 10x to 100x to 1,000x power. Next slide. And it is the following. Imagine you're 90 years old, right? You've got this coprocessor that's part of you, that's 1,000x more powerful than you. You're 90 years old, you're on your deathbed, right? Your bio body is wearing out, right? You know you're going to die in the next hour, right? And so, but the you that's going to die is just the bio side, but the you that's silicon can live on, right? So you have a choice. You can let everything be turned off, or you can simply clip it like a fingernail. Your bio side, it gets turned off, but your silicon side stays, and you stay you. Some people will want that, some won't. Clip it like a fingernail. So, next slide. So, just to wrap up then, to summarize all of this. Next slide. Just 2 slides. So, AI superintelligence is coming, right? You can deny it, but it's going to happen. There's too much money. Next slide. And so what do we do about it? You bring brain-computer interfaces to the masses with things like silent messaging, perfect memory, and other killer apps. And the thing is, market forces and AI risk will drive us to a competitive substrate, driving up bandwidth. Next slide. And where does this take us? With human superintelligence, we can explore the cosmos and reshape it, right? So this is the positive vision of the future that I really, truly, profoundly hope we can make happen. Thank you.
I prepared a set of questions, but Trent, you explained us what AI is, from where we come and where we are today and where we're going to go in the future. But you went so fast that we could not even ask any questions. So if we even want to try to moderate a panel with you, it's not possible because you are just way beyond the intelligence that many people in here, but at least I'm amazed of how you can explain this and make it even understandable, which is so complicated.
My secret, I have a chip.
But I have to tell also another story. I went to an event, I think in September, October last year, that was organized in Lugano. And it's actually a very important family office that did that. And they did this event on AI related to financial industry. And it was like an hour conversation, hour and 15 conversation with 3 different people talking. And after 20 minutes, 25 minutes I was in there, I said, well, I'm bored, I'm going to leave. I stayed for an hour and a half because I wanted to see what happened. And then I was thinking, okay, well, I would like to add a third day as we did today. We did Wednesday, we did Thursday, and today we did something with less people, so it's a close community that we did, and we're trying to build something around this. I have some ideas in my back of my mind. But then I said, what are we going to talk about? AI, everybody's talking, we read it on newspaper, we see this all the time. Maybe it's already a little bit the past. And then I had a conversation with Trent, said, what do you think? Can we still talk about this? I said, Sascha, what are you talking about? It's only beginning. Oh, so what are we going to talk about? And he told me a little bit what he wants to talk about, and I guess it's very interesting, but maybe we have to watch the video a few times so that we understand actually what we talk about. But at least it was amazing, and thank you for what you did. And I was looking into people's eyes also. Everybody's very attentive. And I don't think that anybody got bored, and that is really important. But what is even more important for me is that when we do this kind of event and you guys come from abroad and you take your time, a beautiful place, we're going to enjoy a nice lunch and good wine and everything, but it's very important that time is value, and we need to make sure that every time we do something and you guys come, you get something out of it. And I'm definitely sure that this happened today. So first of all, again, a great applause to Trent. And of course now we can do some questions, but I still want to add a little piece of information that I have prepared for next year. And during lunch, we will have a person that also came from England today, and we actually wanted to moderate this together, but we couldn't do it together, right? Because you did everything alone, and it's much better. But during lunch, we will have a small introduction on decentralized science, which is basically, it's part of what we probably spoke about now, but this is like IE probably 10 years or 15 years ago. So it's, again, extremely advanced, and I'm sure that about this Trent can talk about it also. But we have also friends from another venture capital fund, ID Theory, and Graham is going to talk to us later and just give some introduction. And also, hopefully, you guys are interested in what we did today. And during the year, the idea is to send a quarterly update on this team so that when we come, we will be more prepared. So we're looking forward for that later on. Please, any questions to Trent on what is happening and how we can actually, I have a question for you. Okay, I work for BII also. We are in wealth management, and I'm thinking, well, how can we actually monetize this and find very good investments for all of our clients? Do you have an answer for that?
Yeah, so remember at the very beginning of my talk. So actually, imagine that you had invested in OpenAI at the very beginning, right? 7 years ago, whatever it was, right? Then your return already would have been tremendous, amazing, right? So if you could sort of rewind 7 years with the knowledge of now, 7 years from then, it would be very useful. So what I was trying to teach you today is about a future that has a very good chance of happening, and then walking you down the garden path of how that might happen, right? So you can view this as the opportunity to invest in BCI, and I'm not shilling any particular BCI startup because I don't have a BCI startup myself or anything. I just consider this important enough. So from an investment perspective, it's imagine that you have this tremendous alpha for investing, and it's sort of like where crypto or blockchain was in 2012, right? Or where AI was in 2015 or 2017, right? And but so now you've got this alpha that's 5 years, 7 years ahead of others. And then the question is, where are ways to invest in BCI, right? So right now, to my knowledge, no BCI funds exist. You can only invest in startups. And those startups are actually hard to find, quality startups, right? I'm searching myself, but I have trouble. So because there are not that many of them, right? You find ways into private rounds of Neuralink or something, but there's not that many. So, but as more people realize that this is the way, and as more people realize the money behind this, then it's going to come. And like I've talked about, there's already been very good exits, right? The Metas and the Apples of the world are steadily gobbling up these startups, right? The largest that I know of, like I mentioned, Control Labs for 500 million, but there's a lot of other acquisitions for 10 million, 50 million, 100 million. And you can just look through the SEC filings of Meta and Apple if you want to see for yourself. So that's the answer, I think.
You see it? Yes.
Yes, so the question is, what's the implication on education? I don't see it as cheating, right? If a circuit designer sits down in front of a CAD tool that costs $100,000 per year per seat, and they're using that CAD tool to design that chip along with their 10 colleagues to design this chip with 20 billion transistors, is that cheating? Should have they done it by hand? No, right? So when you sit down to write that term paper, you should use all the tools available to you, and the education system needs to adapt to these tools of today to acknowledge it, right? And instead, go higher levels, right? So a funny thing about, with Moore's Law, every 18 months, the number of transistors has doubled, right? Since the 60s. Every 18 months, 2x more transistors. So the AI, the compute, and the algorithms has had to keep up to handle more and more and more and more, right? So it's always been the same number of engineers, about 10,000 analog designers, ever since 1965. And 100,000 to 1 million digital designers, and that's it. There's not. But now, instead of designing a total of, say, maybe 1 million transistors a year, they're designing a total of, say, 100 trillion transistors a year, right? So it just went up exponentially. They can be much more productive, and this is how I see the AI tools of today: more productive for term papers, for making movies, all of this.
But the thing is, what is interesting for me, like 5 years ago, everyone said you need to study computer science to find a job.
Yeah.
What do you need to study now?
So I'm going to go back to my experience in the world of CAD tools. So these CAD tools, right, they empower analog designers or circuit designers to design way more efficiently than before and verify more efficiently, right? The way that I view things, and it's not just 2x more efficiently, it's 1 million x more efficiently, right? Now what's happening is that we're getting CAD tools for everything else to be 10x, 1 million x more efficient, right? So could you repeat your question? Because I didn't quite answer it fully and I wanted to get to something. I just forgot. So repeat your question, please.
No, I asked what you would need to study now.
Right, yes, exactly. So if you're an electrical engineer, you still need to start with the basics, right? You need to sit down and study math and linear algebra and calculus and all this. And then you get into semiconductor physics and all this. So to be able to use the tools and wield them with power, you need to be able to do the design manually, right? Just like if you want to be a really great software engineer, you do need to understand assembly language, like machine code and assembly language and compilers and all this, because when you're working at the level of Python or higher, if you understand what's going on, it gives you great power, right? So circuit designers, these analog designers that use these tools, they have PhDs in pure manual design, where the tools are an afterthought, and that's really useful. So everything we're learning, we should still learn. We need to have the foundations such that we can be more powerful when we're learning the tools. Now, sometimes those foundations won't matter, like, there's not as much need for a blacksmith anymore, or, for horseshoes or otherwise. But in general, for education, the foundations really matter. Yes?
Yes. So I wanted to ask a question. So thank you for the presentation. I think probably it's the most influential presentation that I've seen in my life, and scary too. I wanted to ask about the last slide that you shared about the silicone part with the brain that you can clip it off as a nail.
Yeah.
That part. So you can put that then, you clip it off and you can put that in a baby?
No, it's not that. Okay.
So that it builds on that, so it's like so the knowledge that's been accumulated there, just like in that way, continues in in the next generation. Kind of.
Allow me to elaborate,
Yeah.
but I cut you off maybe.
And the second question is then, following all of that, so in the future, I mean, it's already looks like a very unbelievable future. So with the babies, like, can you have a baby? Can babies be born, without the humans, and basically in that perspective, and having then those chips already kind of adapted and put into the babies already at that, at the embryo stage, maybe even.
Great question. So this is the picture. This is your bio side brain, the meat bake side, and this is the silicon, right? This is all you. There's no it. This is you too. So if I have this coprocessor that's part of me, when you're talking with me, it's not going to be just the bio side of me interacting with you. It's going to be that side too, and it will have its own patterns of consciousness, et cetera, that have emerged, right? And we see this already happening within neural network models and so on. There's emergent intelligence, right? Researchers of the world like John Holland and so on, there's a lot of work on that, and so this is why we don't understand neural networks perfectly, because it starts to look like neural architectures, literally, right? But the core point is, this is you, both of it, right? So let's say that I'm 90 years old, and me, Trent McConaghy, is the bio side and the chip side, right? But then the bio side breaks. But because it's only 0.1% of the overall me, if the bio side breaks, I clip it away, the bio side clip it away, well, I still have 99.9% of me. And if you ask me, hey, are you really Trent McConaghy? I'm like, of course I am, and I am, right? Because this thing, this part of me has grown alongside the bio side, right? So that chip, it will, the chip that I'm inside, it's not just inside a chip per se, it lives on the cloud, right? It's networked, it has multiple copies. It's on blockchain, of course, because it has to be. You don't want someone to unplug you. You don't want Jeff Bezos to say, I don't like Trent, he's gone. So you definitely live on the cloud, and you have to have private data, like you have to have data management using Ocean, of course, not your keys, not your thoughts, your keys, your thoughts, not your keys, not your thoughts, all of that, right? So then this pattern of intelligence, it's out there, and this pattern of intelligence is me. So and I want to give you a bit more background to this. So in my first year engineering class, in 1994, we had one class called Linear Systems and Design. And in that class, we would be given, say, a set of equations, of differential equations, and those differential equations, they were linear equations. The professor said, okay, now draw out a circuit for this, and you'd have to show this mesh network of resistors and transistors and so on, right? And then the professor said, okay, now draw out, like that was an electrical circuit, now draw out a thermal circuit, and you take those and you manifest that same system, that same relation of the dynamics as a thermal system with heating and cooling. And then they would say, okay, now do this with water and pipes, and do this with mechanical, with pulleys and gears, okay? So it's the same dynamics, it's the same pattern that you can manifest in different mediums, but it still does the same thing, okay? So fundamentally, we as humanity, we as individual humans, what makes us us is not the bio side, it's not the carbon, it is the pattern of intelligence that happens to have this bio-based substrate. But it's very critical, right? We're naturally sort of bio-narcissists. We love our biology, we love our bodies because that's all we've known, right? The thing is, carbon is not a deity. There's no God that we pray to saying yes to carbon, right? So when my body is giving up on me, do I want to die? Well, I don't want to die when I don't want to die, right? I want to choose when I die, if I ever want to, right? Maybe it's a curse, maybe not, but I can choose. So ultimately, there's, to wrap this up, two parts. There's this idea of a pattern of intelligence, which is sort of like a fancy dynamical system, and it can live on many substrates, just like my first year engineering class. It could be electrical, it could be thermal, whatever, right? And we as humans, we're used to this pattern of intelligence living on our bio brains because that's how it's been for a million years. But as we go forward, now we have the technology where we can actually have it on other substrates. Silicon in the near term. After that, there's post-silicon substrates, things like optical and so on, partly silicon. And who knows what else in the future, right? But that's where it is. So I hope that answers your question. Carbon is not a deity.
Okay, sorry, I've just got the microphone. So, yeah, great talk, thoroughly enjoyed it. Slightly related to that question, and quite scary, isn't the logical conclusion of all of this that given that the brain is most receptive to learning and taking on new information in the early years before the kind of neural pathways cement, that we should be putting chips into babies almost immediately to actually help train their brain, so the biological side of their brain is actually more advanced, and then you're combining that with the silicon side later on, and the combination of the two is like more sophisticated. And so, yeah, does that happen? Is that where we go? We just do it earlier and earlier, and
well, so overall, so it's actually a myth that our neurons crystallize. Our brains are way more plastic than we realize, right? So this goes back to the quote, "We are natural-born cyborgs." So that, for example, you know, there's been stories where people lose vision because maybe their optical nerve gets severed or something. So then they get a special camera that then sends actuators to their tongue, for example, and it's putting little pinpricks on their tongue, a grid of pinpricks, and then they can literally see with their tongue, right? But they've also done it, not just the tongue, but they've done it on like skin on the body and stuff. And your brain very quickly decides that that's its new eyes. And that's just how it is, right? So the brain rewires very quickly. If you actually take glasses with mirrors and flip around upside down versus right side up, and you start walking around, it'll feel completely disorienting for an hour or a couple of days, right? Because everything is upside down. But then flip, and your brain has rewired itself so that suddenly everything is normal again. And then if you take off the glasses, it'll be upside down for an hour, and then flip, your brain will flip back. So our brains are much more plastic. So the way that I see it, I don't think we have to worry about any of that. If there's market forces, as well as the Overton window is shifted, maybe that'll happen. And by the way, the concept of the Overton window is very important here. So what I shared with you guys today, some of it feels scary to you, right? And I can see why, but like I said, this is a bit of a black pill in a sense. But as we get adoption on these, and then they go to the EEGs and so on, we're gonna get more and more used to it over time, right? And we're going to get more open to these other possibilities in the future. So that's the Overton window shifting. That's mainstream and people in general becoming more open, more receptive to ideas. Just like, you know, 10 years ago, we were pretty unhappy with how Facebook was using our private data and stuff. But the new generation, as they grow up, to your point on that, they're just like, whatever, this is how it is, right? And even I think most of us in our age were like, okay, maybe we're not happy with that, but that's how it is, right? The Overton window has shifted. And so the Overton window, for this to happen over time, it needs to shift. But because it's an evolutionary thing over several years of market forces, it will shift. And the main reason is it's going to make you smarter. It's going to make you money.
Look, I have a scientific concern here and a business question. For the scientific concern is that you're talking about the human body as it was a passive system accepting all of this, whereas what we are today is the results of a 2 million years evolution in a context. All of a sudden in this context, which is the environment that we're living in, we're all popping in at a very high speed, which compared to the evolution of a human being is like less than a blink of an eye, a really impacting system. And we are expecting that the body will just accept that without changing its own evolution. Yeah. You know, to me it looks a little bit like the Jurassic Park thing, right? So you're bringing the dinosaurs back into human beings, so a living system should not be there, and you expect that it's just getting into the system, you know?
I think it's a great question, right? And I think the answer is that if you think about tools that we used, say, 20,000 years ago, right? We had fire, we had the wheel, maybe some initial civilizations, and then rewind to say 4,000 years ago, we've got, you know, the Greeks, then the Egyptians and so on, where the technology keeps changing and getting better, but also some technology goes obsolete. So each of those, we didn't have to re-evolve our brains. The brains were general enough to handle it, right? And that kept happening and changing, you know, through the Dark Ages, through the Renaissance, through the Industrial Revolutions, through the computer revolution, which is happening now. So we've already seen that our brains are general purpose enough that they can adapt and take on new patterns very readily. And all the modern theories of brain, things like the 10,000 brains theory of Jeff Hawkins, which is inside your brain you've got 10,000 little brains, and then they each propose their own little ideas. And then you've got a blockchain-style consensus algorithm to decide which idea to run with, right? So things like this, it's pointing to the brain itself being a very general purpose, and at the heart of it, learning, adapting, right? So that's actually what has allowed us to keep our technology evolving over time, because we were able to keep up with it, because our brains are general purpose enough. What I described here is actually part of that evolution of the technology side, right? Now it gets closer to our core of self, much more than anything else before, right? But at the heart of it, we are natural-born cyborgs. I've talked about, the eyes being replaced by the tongue device, all of this, right? So it's kind of shocking how much our brains will adapt to whatever sensors and actuators that brain has to the world.
I'm just very skeptical about this, because it's a matter of speed. Okay, so the speed that it took to the will to get into the leaving is not the speed that you're talking about here. Okay, so it's much, much faster. And on top of that, you mentioned before, we have only barely an idea how the physiology of the body works, and you're talking about injecting something, blinking like photons into the brain. We do not have an idea of the long-term consequences of a DNA-related virus injected in the body, and you're talking about getting something into something you don't know how it works to modify it. So I accept what you said as this is happening, but still for me is very unresponsible, because you don't have a knowledge of what you're touching, pretending it's going to go in the good way. And on top of that, you keep talking about intelligence. But you never define intelligence. Okay, you take it as a postulate. But what I can tell you for sure is that as of the social studies today proving, the more intelligent you are, the less happy you are. So do we really want to be super intelligent? I would rather prefer to be super happy.
Yeah, so overall, right, do you want the AI overlords that are 1,000x smarter than you stepping on you? That's a very good question. It's a rhetorical question.
So you're saying we're all busted. We're just going into a direction we could not stop.
I agree. So this is part of it.
But get to the business question. This is too physiological. That's the business question.
Yeah, agreed. So on the physiological, so I actually I'm half forgetting your question already because you covered so many things. Maybe review the first point again. I just want to be thorough.
We'll talk later.
Yeah.
The business question is very short. Infrastructure.
Yeah.
Okay, so I see when I use ChatGPT before, my limited time, the time I can use it is limited because they said we don't have enough infrastructure.
Yeah.
So can we invest in energy and infrastructure
yeah.
in order to make all of this possible?
Absolutely, yeah, of course. And in fact, there's already infrastructure investment happening for AI. So this will glom onto the AI. It's one of the killer apps of AI, if you will, right? On the other questions, I think they're really great questions, and I have really great answers for them. But the question, can you please, I think it's useful for the audience. Maybe just refresh me now, or do you remind?
Yeah, let's okay. Since this becomes extremely technical, so maybe with this one we can talk during lunch.
Right.
Let's give a little bit space to some other people that can ask some more questions. So then slowly after we got to wrap it up, because I guess you must be getting a little bit tired, no?
I'm good.
You're amazing.
I had a bunch of caffeine, so yes. Happy to chat after.
Please.
So I found the presentation to be very enlightening. You must be familiar with the extended mind theory. It's been around for maybe 10 or so years. I think that a couple of books have been written. It's probably going back to Einstein, I think. I would take this presentation and kind of turn it slightly to make it perhaps even more applicable to the audience and say that the place to invest is in the ecosystems of the next compute platform, not necessarily AI, because the next compute platform, as we've seen over and over and over again, which we can all be skeptical of, but we've seen it for centuries, is that the race to the human superintelligence is actually in us developing tools and capabilities that extend the mind, that allow us to think outside of the biology. And that as we do that, we get more intelligent. Like our kids learn how to use touch interface far before I ever watched Star Trek and saw it for the first time, in science fiction. And so we know that this works. And so I think we should all be paying, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, but I think we should all be paying attention to how we can invest in that ecosystem that brings about the next compute platform. That's what Zuckerberg's doing. Yep. And he's struggling to do it with $15 billion a year. He's struggling to do it. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, to me, I think right now one of the bottlenecks is a lot of the advanced neuroscience sensing hasn't been taken out of the lab, right? So the question of optogenetics, it's only hitting human scale trials now. And there are concerns, right? So that's one thing, like optogenetics needs a lot more investment, including towards trying to commercialize it. And there's about 10 different technologies like that, right? EEG is researched to death, right?
Or software engineering, developing applications, simple things.
Yeah, like absolutely. And then there's some other things too, like the cognitive liberty problem, the not your keys, not your thoughts. That's a big challenge too, right? So a lot of these things need to get worked out. I think from an investment perspective, the sensory of the neuro, I think there's a lot of opportunity there, because if you end up with one of the technologies that ends up being used a lot, maybe it's optogenetics, maybe it's near-infrared, maybe it's one of these other even more obscure technologies, then you've got a winner, right? And there's going to be, you can have a patent minefield around it, whatever, right? And it'll probably be like that. This thing isn't going to be very decentralized in many ways, right?
But how do you monetize it? I'd say bring it back to things that are even more basic.
Yeah.
Like I am going to invest in the journey to the human superintelligence by investing in concepts that are mainstream, that are much, much closer to home, that are gesture based. So I don't have to inject myself with anything. I don't have to crack my skull open.
Absolutely.
But I can own my digital objects. I can take that very basic concept and now I can make that mainstream, and then the entire human race moves along with it.
Absolutely.
And that is that hand on one of your slides that pushes us out of those cell phones that were horrendous back in the day.
I fully agree, right? And that's what I've been working on the last 7 years, is making it so that you can truly own your own digital objects, right? So not your keys, not your data. Your keys, your data. That's the heart of Ocean Protocol. But that was conceived of 7 years ago, and now the world has caught up to that. So what's happening 7 years from now? And how do we lay down the path toward that, right? So, but you're right, like what you described, hasn't hit mainstream fully yet. The tools are there, and it's starting to flip over now, right? Now that there's much more discussion around the problem, awareness of the problem, right? Few people were aware of the problem 7 years ago. So it's both of these. It's what you're saying, and then also really truly stuff towards the neuroscience detection problem, all that, right? Yes.
I think I have a very simple question, but whilst I was listening to you, thank you also on my behalf, but I was also looking at these bottles of wine whilst I was listening to you, and I thought that's actually the main killer of my brain that makes it more difficult for me to keep up, and because I'm destroying my brain every day when I drink a glass of wine or more. But on a more serious note, isn't also, for me, a reflex I had listening to you is that beyond all the silicon we can develop and so on, that we should actually do more to maintain our biostack. I mean, isn't also a takeaway from the threat to invest in well-being, in healthy food, in other things to condition the biostack that we already have?
I fully agree. I will channel Brian Johnson here. Live long enough to live forever. That's what Brian Johnson quote, right? And others talk similarly. He's framing, and others too, Aubrey de Grey and more, they're framing aging is a disease, right? Why should we resign ourselves to letting our bodies break down after 100 years and that's how it is, right? Because it's been like that since forever, so, right? So that's their framing. And the thing is, like, I want to make it to 90 years old and 100 years old and 200 years old and more if I can, why not, right? And especially for exploring the cosmos, right now I like my body and stuff, and I hope my body is like this in 100 years and 500 years, right? So I fully agree. You want to, have high quality, like your body, you want it to be healthy as long as you can, and for 50 years, for 100 years, or even 200 years or more, right? And so definitely work on that is very helpful. And so finally, a lot more people are starting to treat aging as a disease. This is the longevity movement, right? And Brian Johnson is one of the most famous of the people spearheading this, but there's a lot of people behind him as well and around. And I fully agree, right? And some of that even distills to near-term things that any of us can do, right? Like, exercise every day if you can, an hour a day on average, or 6 hours a week, and get a good night's sleep always. Ideally don't drink alcohol, ideally don't smoke, and a couple more things, and it's not too bad, right? Eating well. So definitely, like, that goes hand in hand with this, right? So if you really want to, like, join me in exploring the cosmos and reshaping, then do the things now to maximize your chance of being around before the uploads and so on.
Ed, please.
Trent, you have one slide where you compare you have this bell curve of intelligence, and then you show like the superintelligence. If you go to the very back, so
20 slides back.
20 slides back. So you're basically drawing a new race here, which is you're drawing a picture of a race, that there will be a race for bandwidth. So the bandwidth we have now in communication, as you show by this chart, is by birth. What is your...
Maybe it doesn't matter.
Yeah, so as I understand now, you're showing like, okay, there is a distribution of intelligence, the intelligence quotient, but this is by birth. But now you show like technologically there is going to be a race for bandwidth in communication. This feels like very much like there is a new, I don't know, new type of racism to pop up, racism in terms of bandwidth.
Yeah.
So when will you stop communicating with us if we don't have the bandwidth to understand you, because you are much more intelligent with us?
Yeah. Well, overall, right, I mean, technology always distributes unevenly, right? iPhone 1, at first there was just the early adopters getting it right. And then you go from, the early adopters to the mainstream, you have to cross this chasm and all this, and it gets to the rest, right? And with smartphones even, that augmented us in soft ways, right? It was like riding this bicycle for our mind in soft ways, right? But when we are talking about not just augmenting ourselves in soft ways like smartphones, but instead with much more aggressive ways, like BCI accelerationism, it's more like a jetpack for the mind, right? So I think you raise a great point. And so how...
Trent, very simple.
Yeah.
You will be able, let's say in 10, 15 years, to communicate in pictures, in moving pictures, which means your bandwidth will be like 10x, 20x of my communication. I can't understand you because I don't have this enhancement in my brain. Will you even bother talking to me?
Of course, you're awesome.
Because, well, we are friends, so it's like, this is more a philosophical question. So,
yes. No,
which means if you buy this ship, I have to buy this ship as well. You're basically forcing me because I won't be able to hang out with you anymore.
Well, so actually there's two things, right? Of course, like I could just speak at your speed, the speed that I'm not as used to at that time.
You will be bored. You will be bored because I'll be basically snail speed and you will be like...
Well,
10x.
no, actually, so in science fiction this is explored, right? And one of the ideas is simply that, let's say that I've already pulled the fingernail off, right? That would be farther out, but I pulled the fingernail off. Then I simply slow down the clock speed, right? And then it's... I'm not bored because I'm going at the appropriate clock speed, right? So I have roughly, 1 human worth of compute cycles, and you have 1 human worth of compute cycles.
That will give you another problem because you have an opportunity cost. You will wasting a lot of opportunity cost communicating with 10 other people at your bandwidth rather than speaking slowly with me. So
oh no, I just sharded myself. I'd be talking to them too, of course, right? And actually, there's an interesting sci-fi novel where this is a post-humanity future, 5,000 years from now, where it is these patterns of intelligence. But actually, most of them are robots, like androids, so human-shaped robots. And what they do every 500 years, they're a single robot, they've got all their memories, they shard themselves into 500 copies, they go 500 different directions to go exploring the cosmos for the next 500 years. And then 500 years later, they all rejoin, because you're light years away, right? Like 10 light years, 15 light years. So they go exploring, and then 500 years later, they re-meet at a meeting point and merge their memories. So this thing sounds like crazy sci-fi to us right now, right? But for me, like I read all this sci-fi, I live in the future partly, and I try to build bridges to the now. So there's the ways that we think about this in our linear way of thinking right now, it's kind of hard, you can conceive of it, but it feels so far out, and it is far out, but there are mental models for this once we get there, right? So for talking with you, I'll be talking with you with some of my processes, and I'll be talking with a lot of others with other processes, right? But I will be fully engaged with you to the extent that you're happy with that and I'm happy with that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, well, it's up to them, of course, for what they want, but they love all this stuff, right? So they love Papa, so they love all this stuff, right? So,
okay.
Our pet dog is a robot Sony iBoat, so gives you a feel. That's my family.
Okay, very good. I'm going to conclude now the conversation that we had. I'm just going to say 2 more words. First of all, thank you, Hans-Peter, for having allowed me to develop what we have done over the last 5 years in allowing the bank to be a bit more modern and opening up to our blockchain friends, which we have here. And I have to say that 4 years ago, when we started to get introduced to these amazing, intelligent people, I had no idea about crypto and blockchain, 0 idea. And actually, I even hated it because I knew people made so much money on something that I could not perceive and understand. So it doesn't matter. But then something happened is that I realized that maybe we can bring in a little bit of capital that was made in the crypto world and then bring it back into finance, and then we can allow to do the bridge and then build a new client base. And what has been incredible is that, and I'm still amazed now, and thank you that you talked to me because I'm way dumber. I mean, it's you too much. But what I was able to do in that time was to bridge the two worlds and bring some capital into traditional finance and build an amazing, amazing client base and community. And we are here. I mean, of course, we have bank secrecy, so we cannot talk about different things. But what is very important is I've learned so much about our entrepreneurs and our clients we were working with. And this is one example on what we can bring as value and share it with the people that we work with. But it goes far beyond, and I'm not here to sell anything because this is not the context and this is not what I want to do today. But I only want that you guys realize the value that we were able to bring today. And this all starts with people who have invested in technology, with Mark that introduced us thanks to Fabio, and what we have done is amazing, and Scytale Horizon Fund 1 was a lead investor in Ocean, and of course it's doing very well. But this is only the beginning of what we can actually build in the future. So I hope that many of you that maybe don't work with us, in the future will start working with us, and we build value and make things happen and also enjoy what we're going to do now, because now we're going to go and have a nice lunch and enjoy a fantastic wine. Thank you very much.